everyone, and welcome to our special podcast episode titled Caring for the World. I'm your host, Lynn, and today I'm joined by someone who has walked a fascinating path from law into natural farming. Please welcome David Mark, founder of Kebun Kaki Bukit.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to share my experiences.
Hello, Mr. David. As I went through your profile, I noticed that you have a law degree and LLB honours from the University of London. But now you've chosen a completely different path, natural farming that is self-sustaining and based on zero waste methods. I think our audience would be very interested to know more about your journey. Could you share what inspired this shift?
Well, yes, I graduated with a law degree from the University of London's external program. However, I've always had a deep appreciation for nature. Over time, I realized that my true passion actually lies in working with the land, restoring balance through natural farming, turning waste into resources, and building sustainable systems. That's what led me to create Kebun Kaki Bukit. It started as a personal project, but eventually became a living laboratory for natural systems and community learning.
We really appreciate your passion and insight, Mr. David. I also know you have a lot of practical experience from agroforestry to waste to resources conservation, mushroom production, and even eco-friendly animal feed formulation. We've also watched some of your training sessions with the university students, especially those in agriculture. So we know you're experienced in teaching as well. Based on that, would you mind sharing your thoughts with us? We're exploring how to bring environmental care topics into schools through hands-on projects to make them more practical.
Well, basically, my focus has always been on UC students, especially through internship programs, and I also conduct commercial training for enterprises. But educating children early on about sustainability and food production is crucial. I think bringing environmental care topics into schools is a wonderful initiative. It not only supports their learning, but also exposes them to nature and empowers them to be part of the solution. Cultivating this mindset from a young age can help build lifelong habits. I strongly support embedding these values into education, so it can be theory and practical at the same time to create a whole experience. Kids can learn empathy, patience, and responsibility through farming.
Beautiful said, Mr. David. It really reminds us that small seeds planted in young minds today can grow into a big changes tomorrow. That aligns with our company's Chinese language program, book number 4, which focuses on the moral of caring for the environment, as well as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 2, Zero Hunger, especially when you introduced the idea of vermicomposting. We thought that was really practical. Could you tell us more about what it is and why it's suitable for schools?
Of course, vermicomposting is the process of using worms. Basically, in this case, it's composting worms. In my case, I generally use ANC, or we call it African night crawlers, to break down food waste into nutrient-rich compost. It's one of the simplest, most low-cost and educationally rich ways to teach children about decompositions, soil health, and responsibility. Kids enjoy seeing how banana peels turn into fertile soil, and it's safe and clean if managed well. Schools can actually build a small bin out of recycled containers, and it becomes a science corner, a biology experiment, an environmental lesson all in one.
That sounds doable, especially for schools with some outdoor space. What are some common mistakes beginner makes when trying vermicomposting for the first time?
The most common mistake is basically overfeeding the worms or adding the wrong types of waste, like oily food, dairy, or meat, which can cause bad smells or attract pests. Another is not maintaining the right moisture level. The bedding should be like a wrung out sponge. Also, some people forget that worms need a balanced environment too. Too much acidity or heat can actually harm or kill them. But once these basics are understood, it's quite easy to manage. Oh, my second suggestion, especially for schools without outdoor space, is actually aquaponics.
Aquaponics sounds like a fascinating concept. Could you explain it for those who might not be familiar with it?
Aquaponics is actually a combination of aquaculture, raising fish, and hydroponics, growing plants in water. The fish produce waste, which is converted by beneficial bacteria into nutrients that plant can absorb. The plants then help purify the water because the plants act as a biofilter, which is returned to the fish tank. It's a beautiful closed-loop system that mimics nature.
That sounds like a really efficient and sustainable system. I just have a quick question. Does the fish tank smell? I'm only asking because I used to have a fish tank at home and I had to clean it at least once a month to make sure the house did not start to smell. So I'm wondering how that works in an aquaponic setup.
I believe it's a actually valid question. In a properly balanced aquaponic system, there should be no smell at all. The plants and beneficial microbes work hand in hand to break down the fish waste and keep the water clean. Bad smells, I believe, typically occur if there's overfeeding. Well, in my case, my food for the fish is basically live food. I grow duckweed, azolla separately so they can eat anytime when they're hungry. Most of the time, people give them artificial feed and then they overfeed and that food start decaying and that causes a problem. So poor water circulation, decaying food. In my case, to counter decaying food, if I have breed shrimps to clean the decaying food up. Of course, regular checks and good design will prevent this from happening. In fact, many aquaponic systems are used indoors without any odor issues.
That's really interesting, especially when you mentioned the differences between aquaponics and hydroponics. I actually have a question about hydroponics, since I've recently become quite interested in it myself. As a beginner, I'm not exactly sure how to get started. I've heard that liquid fertilizer needs to be added to the water, but I'm unsure how much to use or how often. Are there any guidelines for us or perhaps alternative methods besides using liquid fertilizer?
Well, hydroponics typically requires a nutrient solution added to the water. In this case, actually, normally they call it AB solution, which is basically chemical. So likely it's actually in liquid form. Now, the amount and frequency depend on the crop and system size, but as a general rule, it's best to follow the manufacturer's instructions and regularly check the EC, electrical conductivity and pH levels. As an alternative, you can also try natural solutions like compost tea or fermented plant extracts, but it requires more experience to manage. Hydroponics is great, it's simple, you don't have to take care of fish if you are doing aquaponics, but it does rely on external nutrient input, unlike aquaponics, which is more self-sustaining. Having said that, one still needs to put in additional nutrients into the aquaponic system, like iron or seaweed for the nutrients.
Since I'm really interested in natural farming, I'm curious when it comes to planting. Which do you think is the better choice, aquaponics or hydroponics?
It all depends on your goals. If you want a more natural, self-sustaining system, natural and organic, and the idea of integrating fish and plants, I would say aquaponics is a better fit. It teaches more about ecological balance and nutrient cycling. Hydroponics is more straightforward, but it's more dependent on chemical inputs. For schools, aquaponics is often more engaging, especially the kids with the fish. They love the fish and they will get to see a real life ecosystem in action. In schools, even in small aquaponic setup, you can actually show children how everything is connected. When they see how plants clean the water and fish support plant growth, it helps them to understand cycles and balance. And it's not just theoretical. They can harvest lettuce or mean they can grow themselves. Even a simple aquarium with two components, a fish tank and a grow bed, can make a difference in awareness.
That sounds really educational and enjoyable. You've also emphasized the idea of closing the loop in farming. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Closing the loop means ensuring that every waste product becomes a resource. In all my projects, I practice zero waste as far as organic waste is concerned. For example, in a mushroom farm, we have a lot of mushroom waste we call spent mushroom substrate, and then we convert it into a compost, or better still, feed it to the composting worms, like in the case African night crawlers. We use black soldier fly as well to break down food scraps, and those larvae become feed for chickens and fish. We make our own biochar, from the prune branches or even the spent mushroom substrate to enrich the soil and capture carbon. The goal is to avoid waste. Everything has value.
Since you mentioned composting, could you walk us through how to properly do it? I've heard that some people simply bury food scraps in the ground and wait for them to decompose, while others use different methods. I'm curious, what's your approach to composting, Mr. David? And what do you think schools should do?
At our farm, I use bokashi composting, both aerobic and anaerobic, using EM1 technology. EM basically means effective microorganisms, or basically all microbes that are living. For schools, the principle is the same. Just on a smaller scale, reuse food scraps, compost them, grow food from the compost. It teaches kids that nature never wastes anything. It helps them appreciate resources more deeply.
That's a powerful way to teach respect for the environment. Do you believe composting is something schools should start implementing? How do you suggest schools begin integrating some of these practices?
To me, I think the most important thing is to start. You must always start. Don't hesitate. Start small, start simple. A small garden bed, a bokashi bean, or even a container herb garden on the windowsill is enough to begin. Or you can either invite a local farmer or gardener to give a talk. Organize short workshop for teachers. What matters most is actually consistency. Even just watering plants daily can teach children discipline and care. I also encourage schools to connect with their communities. There are many small farms and eco centers that are happy to collaborate. Field trips, seed sharing programs, and weekend parent-child gardening days are great ways to involve families too.
So true. Making sustainability a collaborative practice transforms our textbook into a living experience. Before we wrap up, do you have any final words of encouragement?
Yes, I believe that every child, every school, and every community has the power to make a difference. Nature is generous, and we must respect nature. If we can instill this respect and wonder from a young age, we're raising a generation that's more connected, more responsible, and more hopeful.
Beautiful said. Thank you again for joining us today, Mr. David. Your insights are incredible, valuable, and truly inspiring.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been a pleasure.
Let's keep planting the seeds of sustainability one child at a time. Before we wrap up, we're excited to share that Mr. David will do a live show for his sample natural farm and the aquaponic. If you're interested in learning more about sustainability practice and how to get started with simple, impactful steps, this is the fascinating opportunity. And for those following our Chinese book for topic care for the environment, this podcast is a reminder that sustainability doesn't have to remain just a textbook concept. Schools can bring it to life in meaningful and practical ways for children. Lastly, thank you once again, Mr. David, for spending your time with us today and for sharing your inspiring journey and valuable insights.